Hello, everybody, and welcome to CELPIP Reading Pro. This is Brandy speaking, and I will be your presenter today. I'll quickly mention here as you're getting settled in that we keep the microphones in Zoom muted by default. So what we'll do today during the session, if you've got any questions about CELPIP, please place your comments right into the Zoom chat box. I will either answer them as I'm able to, as I'm presenting, or my colleague Simon is here today, and he can type also with you back and forth within the Zoom chat. So we'll make an effort to answer every single question that comes our way today during the session. Now, within the next 24 hours, we are going to be emailing you with some helpful links. So please keep an eye on your email inbox. The first link is going to open up a study pack of materials, and that's going to summarize all of the important skills we'll be talking about in the reading webinar today. You're also going to get a survey that will, a link that will open up a survey, and that part's completely optional. If you do want to give feedback, of course, you're more than welcome to do so. And last but not least, there is going to be a link that will take you to a previously recorded version of the Reading Pro session. So if you cannot stay for the entire 2-hour session today, feel free to click on this link and it will open up a recorded version that you can watch again, and you can catch up on anything that you might have missed at that point. Okay, so I'll introduce myself quickly, and I'd like to hear a little bit more about each of you as well. So my name's Brandy, and I am an online instructor for the CELPIP test. I've been helping people prepare for CELPIP for about 6 years now, although I have been teaching for 26 years, all said and done. I started teaching back in the late 1990s, actually, in Northern Ontario, where I'm from. I currently live in Vancouver, which is in British Columbia on Canada's west coast. What about the rest of you? Please let me know maybe where you're from or even where you live now. Let's see how far and wide our audience reaches today. We've already got quite a few people in session, and my guesses are that we're scattered all across the globe. So let's check that out. I'll have a look here at the Zoom chat and we'll see. Okay, we've got lots of people from Ontario so far, which is no surprise. A lot of people tend to, when they move to Canada, a lot of people end up in Ontario. It is the most populated province of our entire country, but it looks like we've got some people here from Nigeria. Yeah, lots of Ontario still. Mexico, okay. Yeah, Peru, I see. Okay, so we're actually not so spread out far and wide. A lot of us are either Ontario or BC today by the looks of things. But again, regardless of where you are right now, I really hope that you're settling in and are ready to do some practice today that will help you with your reading skills. So let's get underway with that. I will mention right before we get into session that the CELPIP test, of course, is taken for Canadian immigration and such. You can also take it, though, if you wish to live or work in Australia. The same CELPIP test is now accepted there as well. So I thought I'd mention that as an interesting fact, and in case any of you are considering your options as far as where you might want to move someday. Okay, here's what we're going to do for the remaining time. We've got, as I say, about close to 2 hours today together. I will begin by giving an introduction to what the reading test looks like on the computer. We're going to quickly talk about how this test is scored and the types of questions that you must be prepared to answer. And once we're through that, we're going to dive more deeply into all 4 parts of the CELPIP reading test. You can see them listed here on screen. For each of these, I've got actual CELPIP passages and questions that we're going to answer together today. These are all taken from past tests. So you'll never see these questions again in the future, but because they were once real CELPIP test questions, it really gives us a good opportunity to practice so we're more prepared come actual test day. At the very end of the session today, I will take a few moments to quickly review our study materials. We've got quite a few free materials. I'll mention those first, and I'll also introduce you to the online bookstore. So let's get started here with our reading test overview. Now, as I just said, there are 4 reading parts. You'll see them listed here one last time. You'll notice that there is a particular number of questions and minutes that are assigned to each and every part. You don't need to memorize these details, but I think just understanding as you come into this test that you will be expected to answer anywhere between 8 to 11 questions for any given part, and you'll be spending anywhere between 9 to 13 minutes depending on which reading passage you're working through. I think that just gives you a little bit of an accurate expectation as to how to manage your time. The fastest anybody would work through this test then would be about 43 minutes to complete all 4 passages. you'd have up to 56 minutes total to complete this test. There is a little bit of flexibility as far as how quickly you can work through these passages. And I'll show you what I mean here as we look at this reading passage example. So here on the right-hand side of the computer screen, when you take this test in the testing center, you're always going to see your questions. And there are often two sets of questions, exactly as you see here. Top set, bottom set. Over here on the left is where you'll always find the reading passage. And you can see that we're using those scroll bars to navigate up and down so we can see the entire passage. And that's what you'll be doing on your test. I wanted to draw your attention to where the timer is. So as I said, you don't have to memorize how many minutes for each part, because the moment you begin a reading passage, I'd like you to look up here at the timer and just note how many minutes you'll have to work through those questions. Now, some of you will finish answering all of those questions, and you'll probably have a little bit of time left over once you practice enough. So rather than sit and wait for that timer to count back to 0, you could click this next button right up here, and it's going to move you a little bit or more quickly, I guess, to the next passage. There's no back button though. So once you click next, you're moving forward. You could never return and change any answers or fix anything at that point. So please only click next when you're confident and ready to move forward. You also do not get to carry with you the extra time that you see on screen. So I thought I'd mention that as well. But the next button is a handy tool. As I say, rather than sit and wait for that timer to count to 0, at which point the computer moves you on automatically. If you're ready to move forward, please just click next and you'll finish the entire CELPIP test a little bit more quickly. Now, there are 3 different types of questions that you must be prepared to answer at any given time during this test. So you'll notice those general meaning questions here on the left. We'll call these very big and broad in scope. A very good example of a general meaning question would be, what is the main idea of this passage? Or what is this passage discussing? When you get a question that asks you for the overview, generally you gather information and details from larger chunks of the passage. It could be several sentences that you need to look at to answer that question properly. It could even be a paragraph or 2. All right, so it's a matter of taking the helpful details from the passage that you'll need to understand and then answer. These specific information questions here, though, in the middle, the second type, these ones are quite a bit easier and faster, really, because the question's only going to ask you about one particular detail. These are the 5 W's, so the question will be based on either a who, what, where, when, or why situation. So when you know what you're supposed to be looking for in the reading passage, if it's a who type question, and your eyes are simply scanning to find a person's name or a job title, chances are you'll find that information quite a bit faster. As I say, the brain and the eyes know what to look for. So these questions tend to be a lot easier for many people who take CELPIP. That final type of question, though, the inference, these ones are definitely the most advanced. The answer choices presented to you for these inference questions will not have been stated directly in the passage. So instead, what you'll need to do is fully understand what you've been reading about, but you'll need to make connections and draw conclusions, make assumptions. So looking at those answer choices, you would be relying on logic and reasoning to choose the answer that makes the most sense based on what you've learned. So higher level critical thinking skills are needed to be successful with inference. And we will be practicing all 3 types of questions today to get you really prepared. Now, I'll mention before we get into practice here that the CELPIP reading test is designed to gradually increase in its level of difficulty from the moment you begin in part 1 all the way up to part 4. So when I say gradually increase in difficulty, what I'm referring to are things like your vocabulary, your grammar and sentence structure, even the types of questions and the amount of critical thinking you'll need. All of these skills will be noticeably higher level as you move forward in this test. And I think you'll notice that today as we practice. Now, here's how your test is scored. You do have 38 questions altogether that are going to be scored on the CELPIP test. So looking at the score chart, 38 out of 38 is a perfect CELPIP reading test. That would earn you the automatic level 12. Level 12 is the most advanced score that you could achieve on any given part of the CELPIP test. And the scoring is really easy because it's the computer that's going to score you. You will be given 1 point for every single answer that you answer correctly. So the math, as I say, is quite simple there. And the good news about your scoring is that you never ever lose points if you get an answer wrong. And I always advise you that if you are running short on time or you truly do not know the answer, of the 4 possible answer choices, if you could somehow even eliminate 1 or 2 answers that seem to be wrong, you might be left with, say, 2 answers remaining. Even if you're not sure which is the correct answer, take a guess. Nothing will happen if you're wrong, but if you guess correctly, well, you'll get a point. And as you can see, every single point is going to help you score higher on this test. So don't worry about penalty. That will not happen for scoring here on the CELPIP test. All right, I see you're keeping my colleague Simon really busy in the Zoom chat. That's wonderful. Continue to place your questions there, please. Simon will type answers to you as I continue the presentation. So I'm going to move on now and jump into the part 1, which is all about reading correspondence. And correspondence is basically a writing, like a letter, and in this case, an email. That's exactly what you'll be reading here on the test. So I'll introduce the part to you really quickly, and then we'll look at some examples. You will have about 11 minutes to answer 11 questions for this part of your test. There will be 2 sets of questions. 6 questions are on the top, 5 questions are on the bottom. So that's pretty straightforward. The main text you're reading through on the left-hand side of your computer screen will be an email, and it's going to be from somebody in the community to somebody else living in the community. Every single content piece on the CELPIP test is related to a very common or everyday type of life situation. So most of these situations, I would suggest you've probably encountered in your own lives. And if so, I ask you to think about your personal experience as you're reading about these other people's experiences. That will help you connect with the material. If you haven't experienced these exact situations, you should be able to fairly easily imagine doing so. As I say, pretty common scenarios that you'll be reading through. There is a second text that you'll be reading, and this is actually that bottom or second set of questions. It's going to be a very short, sort of like an email response to that initial main email. And I'll show you what that looks like in just a moment here. So for instance, just examples of the type of content you might encounter. Maybe it is a customer who's emailing a restaurant or a bakery to put forth a very special order, like a cake for a daughter's graduation. Maybe the email is from a colleague who is emailing another colleague to make travel arrangements to get to a conference together. So as I said, very common situations in life that you should be able to relate to. All right, I'll show you roughly some reading strategies that we're going to use today as we continue on through the session. So I hope that they work for you and you can continue using them as you study at home. The first thing I think everybody should do is take about 3 or 4 seconds to frankly just look at the computer screen. This is not hard. You're not even really thinking. You're just looking to see what part you're working on, how many minutes you've got on your timer. And I think it's helpful to just double check how many questions there are and the length of the reading passage. You're literally getting acquainted with the computer screen, so you've got a bit of a time management plan. So to preview or look at your computer screen takes about 3 or 4 seconds maximum. The next step I would suggest we try today, and as you study from home, is to skim read over the passage first before we even look at the questions. I always recommend that we read over very quickly, say the first sentence of every single paragraph that's presented on screen. Now, I know this computer screen I'm showing you to the left here is very small, and I don't expect you to read the words. You'll hurt your eyes, but you can see the passage. You can see there are 4 different paragraphs. So all I would advise when you skim read is just let your eyes quickly read the first sentence of every paragraph, because each paragraph is going to discuss a particular main idea within the text. And when you have a general sense about what this whole article is about, or this whole email is about, when you then turn your attention to the questions, which is the next step, you'll have a much better sense of where to look in the actual passage to find that information. Remember, any language test you take will have time constraints. You will not have time to read this passage slowly and leisurely to answer every single question. So you do truly need to develop your own strategies that will help you find the information you need as quickly as possible to answer these questions. So skim reading first, then looking at the questions and answer choices to figure out what the question's asking you. I think this is the most helpful, most time efficient way to do this. So keywords, remember, are those 5 W's. And the questions are short. That's the good news. So when you look at the questions and answer choices, pick out the 1 or 2 words that the whole question is focusing on. And when you know what you're looking for, you go back to that passage, which you are already somewhat familiar with by now. You're going to scan. You let your eyes fall quickly over the paragraphs, looking just for those keywords. You're not interested in reading other information at this point. You're only looking for details and words associated with the question you're answering. And when you find it in the passage, of course, that's when you're able to answer the question. So do keep an eye on the time. As I say, every test will have time constraints. But when you practice these strategies over and over, they become a natural way to read a passage. And I do believe that you will improve the speed at which you can answer questions when you do develop your own process. So that's what we'll try today. Okay, I've got 4 questions on the right of the screen, as you can see. And I'm very curious what you already know about an email structure. So my first question up top is asking, where in any email would we find the writer's name? Would you kindly let me know in the Zoom chat right now, please? What part of the email would contain the writer's name? So if you had a question about a person's name, how would you be able to find it, I guess, is what I'm asking you. Okay. Yeah, so I'm pleased to see that people in the Zoom chat are saying you'll find the writer's name at the end. And some of you are also giving us the actual name of that part of the structure. So the signature line is where the writer's name will be found. So what I would suggest you do when you start your reading part 1, let your eyes go right to the bottom of the email first and just note that person's name. You'll probably have questions about them, so just figure out who that person is. And then my second question here is all about the recipient or the reader. So where would this piece of information be located in an email? Let me know where, but also let me know the name of that structure if you can. Okay, a lot of people are saying it's at the top or the beginning, and you're absolutely right. Nobody's given me, a few people now. Thank you for doing that. A few people have given me the name of this part of the email. So the greeting is where we put the reader's name or the recipient's name. That should be the very, very first line in an email. And that is the only thing on the first line. So again, if this were my test, and this is what we'll do today, I want you to note who's writing and who's reading. Just keep those names familiar in your mind, because when you get to the questions, again, you'll likely have questions about both of these people. So it's important to know who's who. That's all. So to find those names, again, takes you, 5 seconds? It is super, super fast. So you don't have to do a lot of work to answer those 2 questions. But my third question is a little bit more involved. I'd like to know where you would find the purpose statement in an email. So in this example, again, we're not reading this email yet. It's too small, but there are 4 paragraphs here. So which of those paragraphs should contain the purpose or the reason that the writer is even sending this email out? Which paragraph? Would it be the first? Would it be the middle paragraphs? Would it be the final paragraph? What would you say? Okay, I'm getting a couple of different ideas here, but I'm really pleased that most of you have it. The first paragraph, about 99% of the time anyway, most often, the reason for writing goes right away. And when we send emails in our own daily lives here, it's very important to let the reader know immediately what it is we're writing about. You're doing the reader a favor by doing this. So when you start your reading part 1 on the CELPIP test, I want you to skim read over that first paragraph. It's usually quite short, but you absolutely must understand what the writer wants or what the writer is writing about. So we'll practice that in just a moment. And finally, then, question 4 talks about the next step, sort of like a future request for future action. Which paragraph would it be just most logical to put a request for a next step? We already know the first paragraphs for the purpose usually. So where would this final action take place, would you figure? Yeah, a lot of you have it. It is in the last paragraph, which we call the conclusion. Okay, so I think most often we put a little request, even if it's just a matter of having the writer confirm a date, or the reader rather confirm a date, or maybe the writer's leaving contact information and wants a response. So these are examples of these sort of next steps that are very customary in any email. So if you're able to locate these 4 details within the first, say, 20 to 30 seconds of just skim reading, we haven't even looked at the questions yet, but if we're able to find these details, you usually have enough of a general understanding of the whole email. So when you do look at the questions, you'll be able to find the information quicker that you need to answer those questions. Let's put these into practice here. So I want you to look at this email. I've taken out the two middle paragraphs. We don't need the body paragraphs yet. That's where all the details go. But this is the passage we are going to workshop today. And I'm wondering what the writer of the email is. As quickly as you can, please look towards the bottom. Look at the signature line, and you're welcome to let me know the name of this man in the chat box if you want. But I think within about 1.5 seconds flat, everybody can see that Adam Stevenson is the writer of this email. I do want you to note the last name. You might get questions about Mr. Stevenson. And if that is the case, well, then you know it's talking about the writer. You might get a question about Adam, same thing. You might get a question about the man who's writing. Well, we know it's Adam Stevenson. So just pay attention to the name, understand who that person is. Let's now change our attention to the reader's name at the top. So have a look back at the greeting way up top, up here. And you'll recognize that we don't know. Adam does not know the actual name of the person to whom he's writing. So he's used this, to whom it may concern. I tell you what, let's go on to question 3. We're going to find the reason Adam is writing. After we've done that, I think we can all make a pretty strong guess as to who Adam wants to read this email. So my third question, talking about the purpose, can you look at that first paragraph, please? Can you pull out about 3 different words directly from that paragraph and type them into the Zoom chat? I want you to find the keywords from Adam's email that is identifying his purpose. This is excellent practice for keyword identification. And people who can find keywords quickly are the ones who are most successful on a reading test. Okay, some of you are writing experience. Some of you are writing share. Yep, but you're missing the most important part right in the middle. I see experience in the first line and I see share in the bottom. Wonderful. Excellent. Now a lot of us are getting the middle section. Yeah. So when I skimmed this, those were the words I found too, but the experience that Adam is writing about is something that happened with a bus driver. That's the most important part of this entire purpose statement. So now that we know Adam is writing to share this experience he had with the bus driver, can we back up to question 2? Who can you assume Adam is probably addressing his email to? Now, we will not be able to guess the person's name. Nobody is that strong at inference skills, but I think we can suggest a job title. So who would be the most likely candidate to be reading over an email sent by Adam all about an experience that he had with the bus driver? What would make sense to you in this situation? Yeah, look through your Zoom chat comments right now. Everybody who's placing ideas there, you all are addressing somebody who works for the bus company in a position of management. Yeah, and I 100% agree. So whether this person is the supervisor, the manager, maybe even a customer service associate, it has to be somebody who works for the bus company, right? That makes sense. But it's very likely somebody in that supervisory position. They would be in the best position to receive these emails all about customer service, really, is what we're talking about. All right, so we've covered the main purpose. Can we move on then to that next step? So have a look at that last paragraph. It's just a little bit longer, but can you quickly, same thing, pull out a couple or 3 keywords right from Adam's concluding paragraph that identify what it is Adam would like to see happen next. We're assuming that he's writing to the bus company. What does he want to happen next? Let me know. Just pull out some keywords directly from this paragraph. Again, it's excellent practice for your key skill identification. Keyword. Okay, the word thanks is coming in. Wonderful, wonderful. The word thanks is coming in. That's a huge, helpful keyword. Absolutely. Okay, what other keywords do you notice there? Driver is coming in. Wonderful, wonderful. And I think there's another idea there that's really important in that very last sentence. And a lot of you have it now. And that word is customer service. So you'll notice most often in an email, it's the very last sentence that will have that request for the future action, if there is one. So when I skimmed over these sentences on screen here, I saw the word too. Thanks, driver, excellent customer service. And that's really all we need to know for now. Now, from just skim reading, We've talked about this process for several minutes now, but when you complete this on your own on the test or in your practice, I want you to try to get yourself up to the capability to find all four of these pieces of information within 20 to 30 seconds. It's very achievable given how short the information is in part one and how fairly relatable the vocabulary is so far. So notice in that first paragraph, we didn't know if the experience Adam had was a positive or negative one. We just know something happened and Adam wants to share. But by the time we read that concluding statement and Adam wants the bus driver to be thanked for excellent customer service, we still don't know what happened, but whatever it was very positive. So already we've just learned so much about this email before we even look at the questions. We will find all of the specific details explaining what the bus driver did. Those will be located in the middle paragraphs. Every piece of writing that you look at, it's the middle paragraphs that will contain those details. So I think just understanding how your paragraphs are structured is really step one to answering a little bit more quickly when you have the sense of the structure of the piece. Anyway, we are going to do 2 questions for practice today. These are 2 very different types of questions. So I thought it would be very good practice to answer them both today in session together. Okay, we'll start with number 2. You would, of course, let me qualify this, you would on your real test work through all 6 of these questions, probably in the order they're presented. The questions usually follow the same order as the passage when you're completing a CELPIP test, so be aware of that. But we're going to only have time to do questions 2 and 6. So we'll start with question 2. On the test, you yourselves are going to click that little drop-down arrow, and it's going to open up the 4 possible answer choices. So this question says, the man is writing about something that happened on. So we would click that drop-down arrow and you can see for yourselves the 4 possible answer choices. Now I've turned off the Zoom chat box just for a minute, just for a moment as we all look at this answer, because a lot of you have taken this webinar before and you know the answer already, and that's wonderful. But I do have a lot of newcomers today, and I want to give them a moment to think independently before we jump in and answer this question. So I'll turn the Zoom chat box back on in a moment, but for now, I'm going to set this up for you with some strategies. So when it says the man, we know that we're referring to Adam or Adam Stevenson. And when we look at those answer choices, you should be recognizing patterns. Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, those are all days of the week. So when you think of those 5 W's, the who, what, where, when, why, this is clearly a when type question. This is a very specific detailed question, which is the easiest type to answer. All we need to do is look back precisely at those 2 middle paragraphs where we're going to learn what happened on the bus. We need to figure out what day of the week this bus experience occurred. And when we understand that, we now know where to look. Again, in the 2 middle paragraphs, we now know what we're looking for. We're going to, and I'll place back the 4 paragraphs. I've numbered them for you to keep us focused. All right, on the actual test, they will not be numbered. But remember, we've already skimmed the 1st and 4th paragraph. We know that the answer to this question is not found there. So can you start at the top of paragraph 2? I want you to scan. I want you to let your eyes very quickly fall over the words on screen from top of paragraph 2 down to bottom of paragraph 3. I want you to look for the words Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and I'm going to give you about 8 seconds to see if you can find one of those 4 words. Okay, that was about 8 seconds. And the reason I made that time really short, because names of anything, whether it's a person or a place or a time like this, names are easy to find in a text because they start with a capital letter. So they tend to jump out at you when your eyes are going over the screen. And by now you would have, I hope, understood that these answer choices are not in the text. Nowhere do we actually see the words Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, or Friday. So what we need to now do is have our backup plan, plan B, I'll call it. We need to find a word within those middle paragraphs that still are associated with the days of the week. So it's not the exact words we see in the answer box, but it will be a word that means pretty much the same thing. All right, I'm going to give you another few seconds here to have a closer look at those middle paragraphs. See if you can find the word. And paragraph 2 is the where. Paragraph 2 is all about where Adam's moved. That's not helpful. So paragraph 3 is looking promising. I'm going to make this paragraph much bigger so we can work with it. Okay, so you notice in paragraph 3, the way this entire paragraph begins, it's mentioning something to do with the weekend. And right away, when we see that word, we should recognize that the weekend refers to days of the week. So that's the connection that we're looking for. It's maybe not the same as Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, but the weekend, at least in Canada, does refer to Saturday and Sunday. There are 2 days. So this is how we're confident we're looking at the right place within this entire email. So chances are, because that word weekend is twice right at the beginning of paragraph 3, our answer should follow right at the top as well. So let me just highlight perhaps in yellow the 2 sentences containing the word weekend, because that's the key word we need. On your real test, you actually can't highlight anything. Be aware of that. But as we studied together today, I thought it was helpful so we can all look at the right place here. So if we think of the weekend as being Saturday, Sunday, when we read out these sentences that Adam's been writing about, he says, over the weekend, namely on Saturday and Sunday, he says, I planned the best routes to my new office. So we learned from that Adam got a new job. And I guess he's just trying to figure out the bus route to get there. So that makes sense. This is what's happening on Saturday and Sunday for him. Now, I'm skipping over that next sentence because that's just about the bus routes themselves, and that's not helpful. That has nothing to do with the when. So we'll skip that. On to that second yellow sentence that still talks about the when. Adam says, however, the weekend, namely Saturday and Sunday, was quite busy for me, and I didn't get caught up on my sleep. I was up early enough to get ready for my first day at work. So understanding that Saturday, Sunday were the planning days where Adam's figuring out the whole bus route to his new office, and he was exhausted, but he was still able to get up early to go to work for his very first day. This is going to be more of an inference question. We need to figure out which day from that answer box Adam actually got on the bus. So I'm going to open back up the Zoom chat box, and I'd like you to answer, please, when you're ready. Of those 4 answer choices, Saturday, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, which just makes the most logical sense? If Adam was planning and tired Saturday, Sunday on the weekend, what day of the week did he very likely get on that bus and go to work, do you think? I'll give you a bit more time there to get your answers in. I really like the participation we're seeing. We've got lots of people placing answers there. Wonderful. It looks like unanimously everybody is going with Monday, and you are absolutely correct. That simply makes the most logical sense. Saturday, Sunday, we're planning, we're exhausted, but we're still able to get up early enough for our first day. Monday is just the next day in the week. So that's the one that, as I said, makes the most sense. So if that logic makes sense to you, well, congratulations. You've now completed your very first inference type question. So see, and it just as a recap, right? We looked at the answer box, recognized we're looking for a when detail. And when we didn't see those actual words in the text, we noticed the word weekend, and we made that connection ourselves. Weekend means Saturday, Sunday. So the answer has to be close by. And from there, we use logic to figure out Adam probably got on the bus on the Monday. Okay, so first question done. When you click your answer, by the way, whichever answer you select, the computer will insert it just like you see here in green print. If you wanted to change your answer on the test, you can. It's really easy. Just click on the word Monday in this case, and the computer would open up the same 4 answer choices, and you would just click something different if you wanted to change it. So the computer will swap out the answers for you. You're welcome to change your answer as many times as you need to, but remember you have a time limit. So it's really, really helpful to be confident with your choice and move forward through the whole test. If you've got time left over, you could go back and double check. But again, don't get caught up on just one question as you might not finish in time. Anyway, let's move on to question 6. Ooh, this is a general meaning type question. The letter expresses. So the letter means email. So it looks to me like we are looking for some sort of an emotion or a tone, right? The letter or the email. Have a look at your 4 answer choices, and I think you can answer this one right now. Look at the pattern: gratitude, concern, sadness, excitement. All four of those answer choices are feelings or emotions that we might experience. And we've not even looked at the middle paragraphs yet, really. We don't even yet know precisely what the bus driver did to make Adam write an email to have him thanked for great customer service. But because we know the outcome and we do know that Adam wants this bus driver thanked for really strong customer service, I think you could probably be safe to make a selection here right now. Okay, and I'm looking at the Zoom chat, and it looks to me like so many of you are going with gratitude. And that's exactly what I would think as well. Gratitude is just another word for being thankful. And because we know Adam wants the bus driver thanked, it just seems to be the best choice here. So if you were in a rush, you might just click gratitude and move on to the bottom set of the questions and feel fairly confident. What I'm going to do before I confirm for sure that gratitude is the right answer, I wanted to take us through one more practice activity to allow us to skim quickly and locate keywords. I do want to look at those two middle paragraphs just so we can see at least what the bus driver did. I think that would be most helpful here, just to double check. But again, looking at patterns and answer choices is so important. So gratitude, which means thankfulness, and excitement, these are both very positive emotions. Those other two in the middle, concern and sadness, are negative emotions. And I didn't really get a negative vibe whatsoever from anything we've looked at. So chances are the answer here at least would be a positive one. So here is the entire email. We've already looked at paragraphs 1 and 4 in quite a bit of detail. Can we start with paragraph 2? We want to confirm that everything in this email really focuses on sort of a positive emotion if we're going with gratitude or thankfulness. So can you look just at paragraph 2? And can you pull out maybe 2, possibly even 3 keywords from paragraph 2? Letting us all know exactly what the main idea of this paragraph is. So remember those 5 W's, hey? The who, what, where, when, why. Right in that first line, I can see immediately what this whole passage is talking about. This paragraph, I mean. Let's do some keyword identification. This is so, so important. And if you're not good at it yet, you need to get good at it before you take the CELPIP test. It's going to really improve your reading skills. If you know which words are important and how to locate them quickly, boy, oh boy, where your skills will improve so much. That's what we're doing here. Okay, so Erwin, you're skipping ahead quite a bit. We'll get to the online map, but you're about at the bottom here of this whole paragraph. And I think we should go in order. So I'm looking at the very first sentence in paragraph 2. Aha, Tracy's given it to us. Thank you for doing that. Do you see the word moved? I'm going to pull out my laser pointer so you can all see what we're looking at. So really all I'm interested now is the big picture. So, okay, Adam moved. Right now, I don't care where he's moved to. That's not important until I look at the questions, but I'm just trying to get a sense. So Adam moved. He had to learn the bus route. Couldn't figure it out. Oh, but then he comes across an online map at a website. So very quickly, that's really all we need to do. So I've just demonstrated where the eyes go. Okay, moved, learning the bus route, didn't know. Oh, online map at a website, done. On to paragraph 3. We've already looked at the beginning part of paragraph 3. That's how we knew that on the weekend, Adam was planning. So these are all the bus route details. So we ended right there. So right where I'm pointing with my laser pointer, can you continue to skim read down to the bottom of paragraph 3? Do the same thing that we just demonstrated for paragraph 2. I'd like you to pull out the key words. Take them directly from the paragraph, so we know how you came upon finding them. But what is the rest of this paragraph all about? Let's just pull out the keywords to tell the story. Pretty tricky, isn't it? Yeah, nobody's answering yet. Let's see. I'll give you some time to think it through and then I'll help you because this is really important, which is why we're spending some time on it now. Okay, Yali's got a pretty good start here. We're getting it. So did you notice that Adam fell asleep? He closed his eyes and nodded off. So that's what happened. He fell asleep while waiting for the bus. Okay, and then a lot of you are getting it now. The bus driver honked. Well, that makes sense. If Adam is on the bench waiting for the bus and fell asleep, the bus driver honked. And Adam is so happy because remember, he's going to work for the first day. So he's recognizing if the bus driver had not woken him up, Adam likely would have missed the bus and been late. And look at all the other positive things the bus driver has done. He's greeted Adam. He smiled at Adam. He said good morning and so on. So this right here is the important piece to the puzzle that was missing earlier. We now know exactly what the bus driver did for Adam, and we now understand why Adam wants that driver to be thanked. Okay, so again, if this is hard for you right now, that's okay. But what I don't want you to do when you take the test is I don't want you to read every single word slowly and carefully. You probably won't have time to finish, at least not in the harder parts of the test moving forward. So if you can develop your ability to skim, understand which words are important, and move on, that's really the skill set that you're chasing right now. You're trying to build up your skills to get to that level to be extra successful. Anyway, when we go back to the question we started with here, the letter expresses, well, everything that we read about here pretty much is a very positive situation. So there's no way one of these negative emotions is going to be correct. And as we said earlier, gratitude means thankfulness. So if you were torn between those two positive emotions, gratitude and excitement, clearly the bus driver is going to be thanked, according to Adam, for great customer service. So gratitude definitely makes the best sense. So this is the tone or the feeling of the entire email. We're left with Adam feeling a strong sense of gratitude. Yeah, so we had that one right from the get-go, but I think it's always helpful when you have the time, of course, to go back and look at all parts. But 2 questions down. So that first one was technically an inference question. The second question we just did would have been a general meaning type question. Okay, here's the bottom set of questions for this piece for reading part 1. You'll notice that this is a little email on its own right. It looks like a man named Bill is writing back to Adam. I see the greeting there, dear Mr. Stevenson. Okay, we're going to do this first one. Notice how it's question number 7, and that's only because we answered the first 6 questions up top, and now we're continuing on. So question 7, and then down to the end as well. Okay, so here is the answer box. I've opened it for you. I think you can answer this now on your own because we have skim read the entire email. So Bill, this man who's writing to Mr. Stevenson, says, "We truly appreciate your taking the time to blank." So is it A, tell us about your transit experience? B, let us know about the route confusion? C, return the bag you found on the bus? Or D, report a problem with our website? So we are trying to figure out what the entire purpose of Adam's email is, right? That's what Bill here is saying. We appreciate you, Adam, writing into us too. So this is a very general meaning type question as well. And it looks like everyone in the Zoom chat box right now has selected answer choice A, which is exactly the answer choice I would have gone with as well. Just look at the language here. Choice A says to tell us about your transit experience. Every single thing that happened in these 4 paragraphs here in the email is talking about a bus experience Adam had. So that makes the absolute most sense. And I would just select that answer and move on to the next question if it were me. I do want to just match up some of the vocab in case you're still not sure. So when you look back to the very first paragraph where Adam gave us his purpose statement, look at the vocabulary used here. Adam says that he had an experience with one of the bus drivers. And now look back at answer choice A, which is the one that we're leaning towards. Look at how similar the vocab is. It says, tell us about your transit experience. So we've directly matched the word experience from Adam's paragraph 1 to answer choice A. And then in answer choice A, the word transit simply refers to bus. And we do see bus driver in Adam's paragraph 1. So even the vocab, the meaning makes sense. The vocab is very close. I'm 99.9% confident this is the right answer. I would like to present you right now, though, with another strategy that will come in helpful, especially down the road when the questions get a lot harder than what we're doing now. We're going to go through those other 3 answer choices, and we're going to prove them to be incorrect. So if you can do this, if all the other choices are wrong, you're only left with one choice. You've got the utmost confidence that your choice is correct. So looking at choice B there, do you see in the answer box? It says to let us know about the route confusion. Remember when we skim read over the middle paragraphs, Adam wasn't clear. We figured that out. He moved. He's trying to figure out the bus route. He wasn't clear. He didn't know at first, but that's when he found this online map at a website. So even though Adam was initially confused for about 2 seconds, he actually figured out his own problem really quickly by finding this website. So this did technically happen in the email, but it is not the main idea that the entire passage focuses on. So that's why B has to be incorrect. Just because it happened in this case doesn't make it correct. We want the overall picture of what Adam's writing about. And if you look at those two remaining answer choices, it's the bottom one that catches my eye right now, where it says report a problem with our website. Well, the website that we were referring to is here. And remember, this is the website that Adam actually used to figure out the bus route. So this didn't even happen. Just because we see a website in the passage doesn't make this true. It's the idea that makes no sense. There was no problem with the actual website. The website is what saved the day and allowed Adam to figure out the bus route. So the only other detail that we've not yet found, I guess, in the passage would be C, return the bag you found on the bus. We haven't read that yet. Can you do a quick little skim read? I know we've already looked at paragraphs 2 and 3 really in a lot of detail. I would start with paragraph 4 then. We really only focused on the second sentence there because it was the request for future action. Have a look at paragraph 4 and see if you can find something about a bag. So it might be the word bag. It might be a word like backpack, knapsack. What else could it be? Something like that. You might see a synonym or a paraphrased idea. But see if you can find the word bag. And I see it. Do you see it? Do you see it there? Paragraph 4? It's actually the word bag. We got lucky. Very, very easy. It's the same word here as it is here. Okay, so this answer says, return the bag you found on the bus. So let's figure out what's happening with this bag. Adam, remember, almost fell asleep, but the bus driver honked and woke him up. So Adam is saying basically he's still half asleep as he got on the bus. And he says he forgot to look at the driver's name tag. And I almost left my bag on the bus. So this bag actually belongs to Adam, and he didn't leave it behind. He almost did. But it sounds to me like at the very last second, he realized the bag was there and he took it with him. So choice C, answer choice C, sure, it talks about a bag, and there was a bag in the email, but the statement in C is wrong. Adam did not return a bag. He didn't just find a bag. That is all entirely incorrect. The bag belonged to him, and he took it with him when he got off. Okay, so if you're ever unsure, if you're stuck between an answer or two, this is the fantastic strategy you can use. Because if you can prove at least one or two other answers are wrong, even if you're left with 2 answers remaining, you now have a 50-50 chance of guessing the right answer. And because you don't lose points if you're wrong, it's a really good strategy. You know, you're increasing the odds that you'll get a point, and every single point's going to help. So I just thought I'd share this strategy with you. I don't think we would have needed it for this question. I think most of us knew answer choice A was right off the top, which is great. But as I say, as the test gets harder and you're really unsure sometimes, this is the best strategy to use, I think. Okay, so we'll leave it at that. We've done 3 practice questions for part 1, which is great. If you wanted to complete the rest of the practice questions for these, by the way, you can find we've got 2 free practice tests right on the website. We'll talk more about that at the end, but you can always go back to these practice tests and fill in the rest with your own practice, which is what I would encourage you to do to really improve your skills. Anyway, let's switch gears now and do something entirely different. This is going to be a diagram. Part 2 is called Reading to Apply a Diagram. I'll set it up first, and then I'll show you the example that we'll be workshopping today. So for this question, it's a lot shorter than part 1. You've got 9 minutes, and there are only 8 questions to complete. So you're still going to have 2 sets of questions. You'll have 5 in the first part. There will be 3 additional questions to answer in the second half. The main text itself is going to be an actual diagram. There will be text, but not in paragraph and sentence form, like we just looked at Adam's email. The text is going to be usually bulleted points and titles. So a lot fewer words and shorter pieces of information to work through. The second text that you're going to be reading through will be a short email from one community member to another. And now that we've just finished an email question, I hope that this one is in the back of your mind. You'll know the structure now of an email and be able to answer a little bit more quickly, I hope. Some examples you might encounter, any type of visual is fair game, but it could be a transit schedule. Maybe it is a course syllabus or a brochure, an event schedule, anything at all that uses pictures and words to convey information. So I'll show you quickly what the diagram would look like. Usually there are 4 parts, as you can see. And then over here on the right, you can see the 2 sets of questions. So that top part is the email, and then we've got 3 short questions below that. So I'm going to show you just the top half of this diagram for now, because I want you to be able to read the words on screen. We'll look at the bottom half in a moment. But for right now, before we look at the questions, I still think we should take about 20, 30 seconds at the most to skim it over and get familiar with, first of all, what this diagram is all about and what type of information we'll find. And when we know how it's organized, we'll be able to answer the questions very quickly. So I'd like to know, first of all, what we're looking at. And if you wanted to tell me the name of the company as well, I think the answers to questions 1 and 2 go together. So please let me know when you're ready in the Zoom chat. What type of visual is this? Who's the company? I think when you know what the company name is, it's going to help you figure out what the type of visual is. Okay, so a lot of you have the name of the company. Right up top, you see B&C business cards. Wonderful. And you can see pictures of business cards, right? So as soon as you recognize that this company, B&C business cards, is clearly selling its product, which are business cards, what do we call that? What is the answer to question 1? What type of visual is this? What type of diagram is this? We'll do a quick little vocab check. A few of you had it earlier in the Zoom chat, but let's see if a few more now can put it into perspective. And yeah, this is a flyer. So a flyer is usually it's a 1-page document, or not document, but sort of like this. It's 1 page. We might call it junk mail. You might get it in your mailbox, or you're right in your mailbox and you didn't even order it. You're not interested, but all of a sudden you open your mailbox and there's this advertisement, right, for a product. So this we would call a flyer, and you all got the company name. I thought that was pretty straightforward. I wanted to draw your attention to the format. Notice that the title here, the name of this company, is in green font, and there are a couple of other details in green font. In fact, the address or the location of the company is also in green, but most of the words in the diagram are in typical black. So when you notice different color choices, the colors are used to draw your eyes there to those details because they're important. So this is just a better way for you to recognize the important aspects of the diagram. Look for changes. What has been done to emphasize the important words. So colors 1, look at the alignment. Do you see how the information at the top is center aligned? Whereas in the body below with those bulleted points, all of that is left aligned. So clearly words that are in the center are done that way to distinguish them from the rest of the text. So just another clue that these words are clearly quite important as well. I notice capital letters on the B, the C, the B, and the C in B and C business cards. So that tells me this has to be the name of the company. All names and titles are capitalized, as you see here. So once again, just being really aware of details, having a good eye for detail is going to help you understand the structure of your diagram. And then when you know what it's about and how details are organized, as I said, you'll be able to answer questions very quickly. Right below those 2 pictures of the business cards, can you see here? It says number 1, basic, number 2, dynamic. Again, these are in green. They're written in all capital letters and the titles are centered. Clearly, they're important. And when you see that the pictures of the business cards are right above those words, basic and dynamic, we can make an assumption here that basic and dynamic refers to the styles of business cards. Even just looking at the pictures, you can see how different they are in color and shape and design. So what that means then is right below each diagram, you've got 5 bulleted points, looks like. And the type of information that's given here is going to make up the bulk of the answers on this part of your test. So at this stage in the game, we're only getting acquainted with the content. You don't have to memorize these details, but I certainly want you to take a quick glance, skim read them, and understand the type of information you're encountering. So here, this first detail talks about the finish. So it's either glossy or matte. And glossy is when the ink or the color is a little bit shiny. Matte would be it's not shiny at all. It's just normal, if you will. So the finish comes first. We get sort of the thickness of the card. This one's really thick or heavy, so it's durable. It won't rip. We get information about the background and the shapes. So we see circles, we see half moon shapes as well. We see colors, and we see price points. And even in the price points, you'll notice that the number of cards is listed first and then the price. And it looks like we're starting with the smallest and least expensive, and we gradually get bigger and more expensive. All right. And then just double checking there's a pattern. Looks to me like a pattern. The finish comes first. We get information about colors, information about prices. So once you've recognized that pattern, when you get a question about a price, for example, you're going to know that you don't have to read most of the words here. You're just going to let your eyes come right down to the bottom line of each section of the diagram, because that's where the prices are listed. So once again, please don't read the entire diagram every single time you have a question to answer. You will not finish the test in time. You definitely want to develop these strategies to find what you need as quickly as possible. All right, so with that in mind, I'd like to do a little role play activity with you now before we get to the CELPIP test itself. So I now have the bottom section of the diagram here on the right and the top on the left. So I'm hoping the words are big enough that you can see it. So what I'm going to do is pretend that I'm a customer and I've come into your store where you work. You're going to be the employee in the situation, I guess. I'm going to ask you a couple of questions about the product you sell, the business cards. Please listen to my questions carefully, identify the key words I'm asking you about, and then find them in the diagram as quickly as you can. When you know the answer, of course, please answer them as well into the Zoom chat. So here is my very first question. I'll make it an easy one to get us started. I'd like to know, please, the greatest number of cards that I might receive with any one order. Please let me know. So I want bulk here. I want the biggest number of cards in my order. How many cards might I get, please? See how quickly all of your answers are coming in? That's wonderful. That's exactly what you need to do on the test. Fantastic. We already knew from earlier that the number of cards and the price points are down here in the very bottom row of each part of the diagram. And I asked you, I didn't ask about the price. So I'm pleased that nobody gave me the cost. I just wanted to know the number of cards. And because we started small and got bigger as we went, 500 is the biggest number in this section. 500, 500, 500. Yeah, so the only slight trick you have to remember is that you absolutely must check every single part of the diagram before you answer. The 500 is correct. That's exactly right. And it took you all, 5 seconds to find that? And that is exactly what you want to do on your actual test itself. Okay, let's make one a little tiny bit more challenging. Here's my second question to you. I'm curious if you've got any discounts for me. So how much might I save on a discount? Please let me know. How much will I save? Nice. Yeah, good. Notice I said how much, and initially you might have thought it was a dollar amount, but I said, how much will I save? So we knew not to look here, even though there are dollar amounts, this is how much these business cards cost. So this would be wrong. That's not helpful. And because we already know what all of these details discuss, and there's no talk about discounts or sales there, I would have turned my attention immediately to here. This is the only part of the diagram we haven't really looked. And because the title here is all in capital letters and it's centered, it stands out to us. So you probably saw the word sale. I hope you did right away. And then over here, you saw the word off. So as soon as you recognize these two words are really associated with saving money as a discount, you know you're now looking in the right place. So when I said, how much can I save? It's not actually a dollar amount, it's a percentage off. So 20% off or 20% discount is indeed the correct answer. And again, all of you answered correctly in the Zoom chat and you all answered very quickly. 2 things you need to do on the actual test. So well done. Really good practice there with your keyword identification and your scanning for details in the passage. So let's apply those exact same practice activities now to the real CELPIP test question. So you can see the whole diagram on the left, and then this is the top set of questions here, numbers 1 to 5 all together. So just as we did with Adam's email in part 1, I think if this were my test, I would still look at the very bottom of this email and just note the writer's name, just to have it in the back of my mind to set it up. So Natalie Moreau is writing this email, and I would also go to the top to find who she's writing to. And would you take a look at this? This is a CELPIP test question. We're not going to answer this question because we did something very similar with Adam's question earlier, but you would use the same logic. You'd have to read through her email and figure out her purpose, and then you could go back and determine which would be the most likely person to read. So we'll skip question 1. It's more question 2 I wanted to get into now. So right beneath the date there, Natalie says, I happen to be shopping for business cards. So I was happy to see your flyer in my inbox this morning. So it looks to me like she's received an email of this exact diagram, this flyer. Now she says, I like the dynamic and unique cards. See those two words? We know dynamic and unique are 2 of the 4 styles of business cards because we've already looked at the diagram. And she says she likes the dynamic and unique because they both, and this is actually the second question, or the first question in this practice I'd like to do with you. Question number 2. So as you're reading through her email, you would click on that little drop-down arrow as we've been doing. Okay, so I'll open that up. Now, I'm the one that highlighted in yellow the sentence leading into the answer choice. On your actual test, you can't highlight your screen. I need to remind you, but since we're studying together today, this is helpful. So have a look at the yellow. I've turned off the Zoom chat box just for a moment, if you don't mind, as I really want to go over these key rules, and I wanted everybody's attention on screen. So Natalie says, I like the dynamic and unique cards as they both. I'll go ahead and read out loud those 4 answer choices, and I want you to notice how they're a little bit longer than what we saw in reading part 1, and the vocabulary is just a little bit higher level too. So we're already starting to get a little bit more challenging with our skills. So it says, is it A, allow for substantial descriptive content? B, are available with raised print? C, are available in a matte card? Or D, feature several eye-catching colors? So we can't answer that yet till we look at the diagram. But before I do that, I wanted to introduce you to these 3 key rules here on the left of your screen. That top one is the easiest way to figure out what the important words are that you're reading. Any words in quotation marks, like this, dynamic and unique, you can see those squiggly lines sort of on either side of the word. Those are called quotation marks. And in a piece of writing, when you see words inside a quotation mark, it means the words have been taken directly from the diagram in this case. You don't have to look for synonyms or paraphrased ideas. We are quoting the source material. So pay attention to quoted words like this. You'll know that they're key. And we already know dynamic and unique are 2 of the styles. So that's what we're going to focus on in the diagram coming up shortly. The second key rule talks about specialized words. And of those 4 particular answer choices, there are 2 of them that use vocabulary that is quite precise and specifically associated with the topic. So business cards are a style of digital print media. So we're looking for words that are very closely associated with that topic that really wouldn't have synonyms or paraphrased ideas. And the first one I notice here is in answer choice B, where it talks about raised print. So you can imagine holding a business card in your hand, rubbing your index finger over the words on the business card. And if they feel a bit bumpy to you, if the words sort of stand up just a bit from the business card itself, that's what they mean by raised print. So those words, raised print, because they're so specific to these business cards, chances are you'll either see those words directly in the visual or they won't be there at all. It's really difficult to come up with a paraphrase or a summary for these precise words. So when we look at the diagram and we focus our attention on dynamic and unique styles, I would suggest we start looking for the words raised print right away because they'll be so quick to either find or not find. So we'll answer a lot more quickly. Choice C there talks about how the style is matte. And once again, matte and glossy are 2 words that are so specialized as they think about the shine of the ink on the card. So these 2 answer choices, we're going to start with them because they'll be the easiest to find or not. If those are not the right answers though, we'll have to go on to that 3rd key rule, which talks about looking for specific details in the answer choices. And you'll notice that first one that says allow for substantial descriptive content. This whole answer choice does talk about content, but the content has to be descriptive, has to be quite substantial, has to be a lot of it. So these words, if we're lucky, we'll see them in the diagram. But chances are, instead of seeing these precise words, substantial descriptive content, we're going to see paraphrased ideas or synonyms. So they'll be just a little bit more challenging to find. That's why we're going to save them for the end. All right, and last but not least at the bottom, you can see choice D talks about colors, but specifically the colors have to be eye-catching. And eye-catching just means really bright or really attractive. Okay, that one's pretty straightforward, I would say. The only other catch is whichever one of these answer choices is correct, it has to be true for both of the styles, dynamic and unique. So we can't forget that little detail there leading up to the question. So first things first, we're going to pull back the diagram on screen. Because we're looking just at the dynamic and unique styles, we're going to only look there. We would be wasting our time on this test if we looked at the other two sections. So here are both the dynamic and the unique styles on screen. Remember, we said we'd start with those specialized words because they're easier to find. So I've gone ahead and I've underlined again, raised, print, and matte. These are the two answer choices that we'll start with. We might as well do answer choice B first. I'm going to give you 5 seconds of time, literally 5 seconds, and I want you to see if you can find the words raised, print underneath dynamic or unique. Your time starts right now. That is 5 seconds, and that is enough when you start to practice with these. I'm hoping you noticed raised print was here, but when you looked on the other side, it is not anywhere to be found. And because we're looking for an answer choice that has to be true for both styles, all we've determined here is that the answer is not B. So it's a step in the right direction. Let's look at that other specialized word, which is matte. We all know that matte and glossy was mentioned in the top line. You have 5 seconds to find the word matte in both parts of the diagram, starting now. That is as long as you need. It's not there. We see glossy, but we don't see matte under both sections. So once again, all we know now is that choice C is incorrect. So at least we're down to 2 choices remaining. We're getting closer to answering. All right, so let's put back those keywords we've identified. So these are specific details, but now it gets just a little bit trickier because chances are we're going to be looking for synonyms. I mean, it would be nice if the words substantial, descriptive, content were on both parts of this diagram, but this is a language test. It's testing your vocabulary, among other things. Chances are you're looking for synonyms. Okay, I'm going to give you just a moment here. You'll need a bit more time. Can I give you even 10 seconds? See if you can find this idea or these words or paraphrases under both sections here. And I'm going to turn the Zoom chat box back on now. Let me know if you found it. Is this the right answer? And if so, give us some help with the vocab because this one's a bit trickier. Okay, so we've got some ideas now trickling in. A few of you are wondering if the answer is D, but a lot of you, most of you now are selecting A. So before I confirm for you which of these 2 answers is correct, can you at least give us some help with the vocab? We're looking for a matching idea. Okay, good. I'm now seeing it. Yeah, looks like we're on to it now. So you could do this a couple of different ways. I'm going to show you how I did it. It doesn't mean it's the only way. This is what worked for me. I always start with the actual words from the answer choices because sometimes they truly are there, like this. The word from answer choice A, substantial, I noticed it right there under the unique. Substantial. So as soon as I see that word under the unique style, I look at the whole line, substantial space for descriptions. And I look back at answer choice A, substantial descriptive content. That means the same thing. This is a paraphrase. I mean, the answer choice says descriptive. The diagram says descriptions. Those are 2 words from the same word family. They're really close in meaning. So we can label that as a paraphrase, meaning the words are a little different, but the idea is the same. So now that we've located answer choice A under unique, we still have to find it under dynamic. And this is where your knowledge of vocabulary is going to help you be successful. And a lot of you now in the Zoom chat have correctly identified this. Plenty of room for text. This is the right answer. The word plenty means substantial. So we've now matched the 2 lines from dynamic and unique to answer choice A. They're all paraphrased ideas, all different vocab, but they mean the exact same thing. So choice A is definitely correct. Now here's the better question. If you knew that the word substantial meant plenty, that's wonderful. You would have been able to answer this question pretty quickly. But what do you do if you don't know the meaning of this word, right? You need a backup plan, as I said earlier. You need to actually look at the other words that perhaps you do understand and know the meanings for and make some assumptions. So we're looking for context clues right now. So we've already matched this line to this line, mostly based on that word substantial, but have a look at the easier words here. Space for descriptions. And when you start to glance at all 5 of these details, I'm hoping you noticed room for text means the same thing as space for descriptions. The description is the words on the business card, and that's what the text is. It's the words. And again, the space is where logistically those words are printed on the card, and that would be the room on the card where these descriptions are placed. So if you can match room for text to space for descriptions, I think if it were my test, I would just make that educated guess that substantial probably means plenty. Okay, you might not be 100% certain, but you have a tremendous amount of evidence pointing you in that direction. So you would very likely select answer choice A and move on. Okay, another way you can also be confident selecting A is you can discount this idea. This one talks about colors, and it says that both of these styles have to be eye-catching. And just looking at the pictures, the unique is tremendously bright. It is fluorescent, right? You can't miss it when you look at it. It's so bright. But looking at the dynamic, the picture itself, it's really, the colors are quite dark. And right in the text itself, it tells us that this style only comes in black and blue. I would not consider that to be very eye-catching, not like the unique style. So if you were torn between answer choice A and D, you would have to choose the one that makes the most sense. What is the best choice? And we just have so much more evidence looking at the vocabulary matchups with the paraphrases that choice A is indeed correct. So this is where eliminating other answers that just don't seem to be quite as strong is actually quite helpful. We're left now with choice A, and it is the right answer, luckily for us, but that would be the process of elimination there as well. Okay, anyway, as always, you click your answer, the computer inserts it, and on you go. And you would finish the rest of that passage. Okay, now we won't take the time today to finish the bottom set of questions, but realize you would use the same strategies there to answer those remaining 3 questions. But we're going to move on now to reading part 3, which is all about reading for information. And this is where the test really kicks it up a notch. It's a casual term that means it starts to get quite a bit challenging here. Your vocab and your critical thinking skills demand a lot more from you here. So I'll give you some guidance and see if the strategies I present will help you feel more confident as you're studying at home. So first things first, part 3, called Reading for Information. You have 10 minutes and you're going to answer 9 questions. It is the only part of the CELPIP reading test that just gives you 1 set of questions. You don't have 2 like you did in all the other parts. All right. Now this passage is very structured. You are going to have 4 paragraphs exactly. Not 5, not 3. It's going to be 4 paragraphs exactly. And the passage itself is going to teach you all about a person, a place, an event, a thing. All right. Everything is fact-based. For example, you might be reading a nature passage. Maybe you're learning about the habitats of an animal. Perhaps you're reading through the autobiography of somebody's life. So you're learning all about a famous person. That's sort of the focus here. So let me first show you what the passage looks like. And I want you to look at the very beginning of each paragraph. Can you see how they're lettered? A, B, C, and D. And E at the end, sorry. And over here on the right-hand side is where the questions are. And I wanted you to notice too, they're not actually questions, are they? They're sentences. I'm going to call them statements as a matter of fact, and I'll show you closer what I mean. We'll take a closer look. So you don't have questions about anything. You're not filling in the blank with the drop-down menu as we have been doing. Instead, these are all full sentences all by themselves. And the answer box actually comes at the beginning of each statement. And when you open each answer box in turn, you get those 5 letters, A, B, C, D, and E. All the way down, every single answer box is the same. And those letters have been put there because they correspond. They correspond to one of those 4 paragraphs from the passage, A, B, C, D. And I'll talk about E in just a moment. This is a matching activity. So when you read statement number 1, you must identify the key words within that statement. And you're going to try to find those keywords somewhere in this passage. We've been doing this all along today. These are the same reading strategies we're using. But the trick here is there's no order or structure to this. If you find, say, statement number 1 clearly discussed and accurately discussed in paragraph C, for example, you're going to select C as the answer to number 1. And then when you move down to statement number 2, let's just imagine for a moment that you match that idea up to answer or paragraph A. Then you're going to choose A as the answer to 2, and on you go. Every now and then, it depends on what test you're writing in the testing room, you might have a few statements that are just nowhere to be found. Or perhaps half of the statement is here, but the other half of that statement is not discussed or is not accurate. And if that is the case, you will select E as the answer to that statement. Some CELPIP tests might have several answers that are E. Some CELPIP tests might not have any answers that are E. So there's not a structure or pattern to this particular passage, not like we've been able to do with our diagram and with our email earlier with Adam and so on. So again, this is a much more intermediate to advanced level of English required here. We're going to have to rely on vocabulary and our skimming and scanning strategies to be most successful. So here comes the very first strategy I'm going to present to you to help you out with this challenging part 3. Can you read, I would say, just the first sentence of every single paragraph? See if you can identify at least what the topic of this passage is. Is there a word that's just repeated over and over again, for example? So I would look just at the first sentence in paragraphs A, B, C, and D, maybe the first sentence or 2, but you're looking for patterns, you're looking for repetition. I want you to ignore the really challenging vocab for now. There will be words here probably that you don't understand. For now, leave that be. I do want you to focus on words that you do know and look for those patterns and repetitions. This is a good starting point. And I do see some really fantastic ideas coming into the Zoom chat box. I'll give you another, say, 10 seconds. This part is still designed to be fairly quick. You're only technically looking at about 4 sentences. So you still want to be pretty quick here. And everybody so far in the Zoom chat has correctly identified dragonflies. So I went ahead and circled that word for you just to prove a point. When you see the same word or sometimes a couple of words repeated over and over again in every single paragraph, you've now discovered the topic of the whole reading passage. So this is definitely your starting point. I guess as we read through this passage, we're learning all about dragonflies. So in the testing room, you are given paper and pen. And I truly encourage you to take notes as you're reading for this part 3. The moment you figure out you're learning about dragonflies, write that down on the top of your paper. Write the word dragonflies. And then right below the title, what I want you to do is write the letter A. So that's going to match, of course, paragraph A. And you're going to take, I don't know, 5 or 10 seconds, depending on your reading ability, to skim read through this paragraph and try to figure out what this paragraph is about. And I'm going to demonstrate this for you because it's challenging. We know we're learning about dragonflies, sure, but as I look through paragraph A, I'm going to skip over some of these crazy big words like carnivorous and odontates. Who knows what that means? Let's not worry about that quite yet. But down in that second line, I think we understand this part okay. Looks like that word dragonflies comes from a Greek word that means tooth. That's really interesting. And right below that, we learn how long dragonflies have been around. And as we keep skim reading forward, I see another number here. The number is 5,000. And I had to back up my eyes to figure out what that number meant. So it looks like there are more than 5,000 species of dragonflies in the world. And right towards the bottom, as I keep skimming, it looks to me like we learn where the dragonflies live. So the habitat would be where they live in the world. And all those details towards the bottom mention water. Did you notice that? Like bogs and lakes and water and so on. So there's not really a pattern per se. I mean, when you look back at all of these keywords, I guess, that we've just circled, we've learned that the word dragonfly is Greek. We know how long they've been around, how many species, and where they live. So what I would suggest we do for paragraph A, this is literally an introduction to what the dragonfly is all about. And if you think back to how a piece of writing is organized, that makes sense. Your first paragraph usually is there to give you the background details and orient you. So this is kind of general information or introduction. So on your piece of paper, what I would encourage you to do is write the letter A, and right beside that, you can title this paragraph however it makes sense for you. If you wanted to say intro or general info, however you wanted to word that. But if you capture that idea down accurately, like we've done here, later on when you come to those statements, all 9 of them, if you're reading a statement that does sound relatively general, kind of like it is just an introductory point, you're going to start your search in paragraph A. You're not going to waste your time looking at paragraphs B, C, and D. You're trying to pinpoint, where would I find this statement? Where would it most likely be discussed? And if you can do that, you've really increased the opportunity to answer more questions before the time is up. So that's paragraph A, introduction, more or less. Remember the middle paragraphs always give specific details? Well, here's your first middle paragraph. Can you skim read this through? And as soon as you start finding keywords, I want you to write them in the Zoom chat. We'll give this paragraph a title later, but for right now, if you could find even 3 different keywords, and let me know in the Zoom chat in order, if you can, even better, what they are. We're going to try to figure out what the focus of this paragraph is. Yeah, it's about dragonflies, sure, but we want more than that. What about dragonflies are we learning here? And it looks like we've got our first couple ideas coming in. Wonderful. Yeah, and that very first line talks about eggs that are fertilized. I noticed that right away too. And a lot of you are recognizing the word nymph. Yep, I saw that too. Now, I remembered that a nymph was from my biology high school class. It's sort of like a baby stage here of the dragonfly. And in fact, this paragraph defines what a nymph is anyway. Yep, some of you are recognizing that after the nymph stage, these dragonflies grow up. They become an adult. And finally, at the very bottom, technically, is where we get the focus here. Yeah, I noticed life cycle too, as did a lot of you in the Zoom chat. Wonderful. So when you look at these keywords, there is a pattern. The dragonfly starts as a fertilized egg, it becomes a nymph, and then it matures into a healthy adult. Clearly, everything in this paragraph is indeed talking about the life cycle. So since I see those words life cycle at the bottom of this paragraph, that is the topic. I'm just going to copy that down. We don't have to be fancy here. Now is not the time to try to think of our own words. Let's just use what we're given. We want to be quick. All right. So on our outline, we've got the letter B for paragraph B, and we're writing life cycle. That's it. So when we look at those 9 statements, if there's something there that talks anything to do with the life cycle of a dragonfly, we're going to look at paragraph B. We will not waste our time in paragraphs A, C, and D. We want to be quick and find what we need. Get in and get out, as they say. Okay, so that's paragraph B done. Here's your second middle paragraph. So this one's going to still be about dragonflies, of course, but it will have a different focus. Please, same as before, start skim reading. And as you find these keywords, please place them in the Zoom chat. Try to do them in order so you're not jumping all over. But let your eyes go quickly over the screen. There's a focus here that we need to determine. There's kind of like 2 different ideas, but they go together from what I can see here. Yeah, so somebody is suggesting the word predators, and I see that right away in the top line. Predators, you're on the right track. I went with hunting techniques though. A predator is the animal or the thing that's doing the hunting, but the hunting technique is how the hunting is happening. And when you look at the next few lines, we're getting information about how these baby dragonflies hunt and stalk their prey. So I think hunting techniques is the closer match. And we learn how they're hunting, but we also learn, what else do we learn? The top part is all about how they hunt. And then what's the bottom half all about here? Can you find sort of what they eat? Yeah, now you've got it. So we're kind of sort of split, like the whole paragraph talks about basically how they hunt and what they eat. All the way through, it's like that. So I don't know how you would title this paragraph. For me, I just wrote down basically hunting and eating because they go together. We're focusing on the food ultimately. So again, you can title this paragraph in a way that makes sense to you, but I do want you to write down a couple of keywords there to remind yourselves what you learned about in paragraph C. So when we look at our statements, if there is an idea there that's closely associated with hunting or eating, we're going to look back at paragraph C. Not the other paragraphs. This would be the best starting point for that. Okay, and now we're on to the final paragraph D. Oftentimes, the final paragraph is a conclusion, so it might not be quite as detailed, but we'd best do a quick skim read and figure out what we're learning about here. So have a look through, last chance to practice this really important skill. Let's find some keywords right out of paragraph D that focus our attention. What are we learning about here? Your first sentence usually gives you the biggest help, by the way, and sure enough, as soon as I said that, a lot of you are figuring that out. Interesting fact. So when I see this right away, in my mind, I'm assuming everything in paragraph D is probably going to be an interesting fact about the dragonfly. Can you start helping me find examples of these interesting facts? Let's try to do them in order. What's the first interesting fact mentioned in this paragraph? You'll have to skim read down a couple of lines. Yeah, the speed is there. Yeah, it's one of the fastest insects in the world. Wonderful. And then right after that, some of you were mentioning that field of vision. They can actually see in an entire circle, which is actually really fascinating. And then that very last part is, we don't have to get into it in a lot of detail, but that whole bottom section of this paragraph talks about how they were purposely introduced into Myanmar in Southeast Asia to eat mosquito larvae so people weren't getting sick from viruses and on. So I just glanced over that really quickly and recognized, okay, this whole paragraph is pretty much giving us interesting facts about the dragonfly. That's our takeaway here. So the whole purpose of skim reading and pulling out keywords and titling these paragraphs, you want to be as fast as you can. You don't need to get into too much detail when you're doing this. You just want that overview or that general idea. Because again, as I say, in any of these statements, if something just sounds like an interesting fact, we're going to start our search in paragraph D. You always want to find a starting point. So you're not reading each and every paragraph for all 9 statements. You will not finish in time. Not even the strongest reader would be able to finish in time. Okay, so make it easy on yourself if you can. We have time to do one particular practice activity here. For this one of these 9 statements, we're going to do what I think is one of the more challenging ones, number 6. Number 6 says, a nymph's maturation rate depends on its nutrient intake. Check out the vocab. Definitely higher level than where we started with Adam, right? Back in paragraph or passage 1. So we're at an intermediate, approaching advanced level here. So we'll make do with the best of our ability what we can do here. Which of these 4 paragraphs probably would talk about the nymph, how much or how fast it matures, what it eats, that kind of thing. So I've got the same outline on screen. These are the same ideas we've already jotted down. Imagine this is a piece of paper in front of us at the test center. Okay, a lot of your answers coming in, you're all saying it could be B and it could be C. And I agree with your line of thinking. But what I would recommend you do is choose a true starting point. The focus of this sentence or its subject is a nymph's maturation rate. And we know that the nymph or the baby little dragonfly would be discussed right here in paragraph B, life cycle. I would probably start my search there. If I did not find this statement in paragraph B, I think that's when I would then look at paragraph C. Because part of this statement here does talk about the food it eats, right? Its nutrient intake. And we know paragraph C talks about food as well. So we have a chance maybe of finding this statement in either of those middle paragraphs. We won't know until we look, but I still think paragraph B is a better starting point than paragraph C, to be sure. If we do not find this statement in B or C, we're moving on. We're selecting E and we're moving on. And the reason for that is just look at how specific the language and the idea is in that statement number 6. There's no way this is a general piece of information like an introduction. And it doesn't really sound like much of an interesting fact either. So this would be more of a specific detail that is usually found in the middle paragraphs. So again, your sort of strategy here is maximize your time. It's either there or it's not, moving on. That's how I would do the test in this way. Anyway, here's our statement. Of all words in statement number 6, what is the most important word? Which is the key word that you're going to look for first in paragraph B? Let me know. I just want one word from this sentence, one word only. This is another great opportunity to practice your ability to identify keywords. Okay, so some of you are giving me different answers, but most of you, I'm happy to report, have correctly identified nymph. The word nymph, remember, is it's a biological term referring to that baby dragonfly. And because it's a biological term, chances are the word nymph itself is actually going to be there in paragraph B. And I remember it already. Can you remember back when we were looking through? We said, oh, nymph is there and it matures and so on. So we know for a fact the word nymph is going to be found in paragraph B. And that's what we want. We want a starting point. Okay, once we locate the word nymph within that paragraph, that's when we turn our attention to the other specific details. So these underlined phrases, yes, they're important, and yes, they are keywords, but they're secondary. The starting point will be nymph. We find that word first. Once we find it, we want to read all about the maturation rate. And chances are we're going to have synonyms here. We might see words that talk about how the nymph grows up or becomes an adult or develops into an adult. The rate refers to the speed. So we might see a time frame and so on. So keep an open mind as you're reading through paragraph B. You're keeping an eye out for any of these details that talks about how long it takes for this little baby nymph to grow up into an adult in simple terms. That's what we're trying to figure out. But there's a second half. This is what makes it a bit tricky. We have to determine if the speed or rate at which this nymph matures, does it depend on the nutrient intake? In other words, does it depend on the food that this dragonfly is eating? That's what we're trying to find. Okay, so looking at paragraph B, we want to find the word nymph as quickly as we can. And we already did this earlier when we skim read. So hopefully you can find it yourself really quickly. The word nymph is there twice, but the first instance of the word nymph is just the definition. You'll notice it says a nymph, an immature water-dwelling insect. So that's not helpful. We know what a nymph is now. Thank you. That's great. It's the second instance of the usage of the word nymph. This is what, oh, look at the numbers there from 1 to 4 years in the nymph stage. Now I know we're looking at the right place, right? Because we're trying to figure out the maturation rate and so on. Can you do a quick skim read of the yellow phrases I highlighted for you? These are the ideas right around that word nymph. Just double check you can see keywords that details the maturation rate and the nutrient intake. Have a quick look. I see 1, I see 2, 3. There's lots of words in there that detail the maturation rate. I think the time in years is the most helpful, but check this out. We're talking about that nymph growing up into an adult. So that whole first section of statement number 6 is there, and that's wonderful. But we still have to figure out if the 1 to 4 years depends on the food it eats. I guess you'll have to now look either above or below the yellow highlighted phrases. Is there anything in this paragraph that talks about food? Please let me know. Have a quick look. You're looking for words like nutrient, nutrition, eats, consume, intake, anything like that will be fine, but we need to see, is there something here about food? And I don't see anything. And all of you, no one here can see anything. And in fact, if I look right before that yellow highlight, here's our true answer. It has nothing to do with the food. It has everything to do with the type of species, right? So depending on the species, that's going to influence the maturation rate, not the nutrient intake. These two ideas are completely different. So remember, so this is not true. Like we cannot choose paragraph B for statement number 6. Even though the first half of the statement is there, it doesn't match the whole idea. So it's not right. We said we would then look in paragraph C, and on the actual test, I would still do that. I'm just going to save us a bit of time and tell you that it's not there either. So this is an instance where you actually would select the answer E. This statement, as it's written, is just not verified anywhere in complete accuracy. So it isn't there, choosing E, and then we would move on to the next statement. Okay, so challenging, yes, but when you study at home, I really, truly want you to break this down step by step. So just to recap, you find the main idea of the whole passage. We did that quickly. It's about dragonflies. And then you want to take anywhere from 30 to 60 seconds, quickly looking for keywords in each paragraph, and you're going to make your outline. Once you've done that, it does take a bit of time to set that up, but it is going to save you so much time in the long run, because now you have a starting point. You will not be reading 4 paragraphs per statement. You're reading just 1. And you're hopefully going to be able to find those keywords on your own in the statement, locate them in the paragraph as we just practiced, and make a determination. Is this statement discussed here? Yes or no? That's basically what we did just here. Yeah. Okay. And I'm just going to repeat myself from before. Christiana and Erwin, you would go on to look at paragraph C, But for time's sake today, I'm just going to save us the trouble and say it's not there. I encourage you to go back and do this on your own. I do want you to go back to the practice test and look at paragraph C and see for yourself with your own eyes that this statement's not there. But for time's sake today, we're going to move on. Yeah, but you're absolutely right. You would want to look at paragraph C if it was the real test. Yeah. Okay, let's move on now to paragraph 4, which is all reading for viewpoints. This is the last part of your CELPIP reading test, and it is advanced. It is the most advanced level here. You have 13 minutes. That's the good news. You get the longest amount of time here. You've got 10 questions. It'll be divided into 2 sets, very much like your reading part 1 would be. You've got your top set, your bottom set. The main article that you're reading here is going to be similar to a news article. What it will do is introduce to you the main topic, as any piece of writing would do. And throughout this article, you're going to encounter anywhere from 2 to 3, maybe even 4 people. You'll either see their names or you'll get their job titles. And you're going to be learning about the opinions of each of these people as they relate back to the topic. That's what a viewpoint is. A viewpoint is an opinion or a perspective. Some of the people that you read about might agree with each other. Some might disagree. It is totally up to you to note who these people are, what their opinion is, and more importantly, why they feel that way. So of the 5 W's, we are focusing on the who, the what, and the why. And this one, you're going to have to rely on a lot of inference type skills to make connections and make conclusions, draw conclusions about what you're reading. So for example, it could be a news article that you're reading all about citizens' reactions to a recent government decision. Imagine reading about that. That's all over the news nowadays, isn't it? You might be reading an article about the impacts of parenting styles, both positive and negative. And maybe you'll be encountering different parents and experts in the article that each have their own opinion about what works best and what doesn't. Okay, so this is what we mean when we say viewpoints. I'll show you just what it looks like first. It's no different. The setup is no different from reading part 1. Think back to Adam and his bus email. Now, this is not an email, no, but the length of the article is roughly the same. And over here, you still have those 2 sets of questions. The bottom set is a response, not a true email, but it is a response to that first article. Okay, and to set the stage here, remember your reading part 4 is the most challenging of all 4 reading passages. So as a result, you're going to have fewer specific detail type questions because specific detail questions are the easiest. You're going to encounter very likely more general meaning type questions, which are labeled here in green, and more inference type questions, which are labeled here in orange, just so you can see the sort of the breakdown. You know, not to say you'll never get a specific detail, but since general meaning and inference are a little more demanding, you will encounter more of them here, as this is a more advanced level text. We're going to do a classic general meaning question for practice. The article is mainly about. So here is the article in question. We're going to apply the same reading strategies that we've been doing all the way along, even though the vocab here is a lot more challenging. Can you still please right now read the first sentence of every single paragraph? Maybe the first sentence or 2 even. I want you to look for repetition. Is there a word or a couple of words that is just repeated over and over again in each paragraph? We're trying to figure out the topic. That's what this question asks. What is basically the topic of this reading passage? That's what we need to know. So as soon as you find some of these keywords, feel free to share them in the Zoom chat and we'll do this together as a group. I've already got a couple of suggestions coming in. That's great. Yeah, there's a couple. I think I also had about 3 words I noticed that were sprinkled here and there throughout. And honestly, as a group, a lot of you, I think we put it all together as a group now. One of the first suggestions that came in, a lot of you said government, and I noticed that as well. But more to that, it's the Canadian government. So remember, your introductory paragraph will be the most helpful. It's going to give you the background. So I see Canadian government, I see funding, and I see arts. That's kind of all I want to know for now. And I'm going to double check that these same ideas are discussed elsewhere. And if they are, we've got the answer already to question 1. So do we find words like government, funding, arts? Do we find them elsewhere? Here we meet our first person and we don't care right now. We're going to skip her for now. We're only looking for the topic. Aha, here, government, arts, ta-da. Yeah, okay, I think we're on the right track. Artists, yeah, and okay, private sponsorship. We're still talking about funding. Oh, there's the word funding there. That's more helpful. So artists, funding, yeah, we're on the right track for sure. Government's down here. Let's skip over this fellow for now. Artists, do we see arts? There we go. So the fact that we have noticed basically this entire thing is talking about government funding for the arts, and it seems to be rooted in Canada. You can answer this question now. I put the first paragraph on screen, but look at your answer choices. What is the topic of this entire passage based on what we just did? Keyword identification in each paragraph. That's what we did to find this answer as quickly as we did. What is the answer? There's only one there that rings true of each and every paragraph, and you've all got it. You've all got it. It is answer choice C. This whole thing, the whole topic is funding for the arts in Canada. Okay, so do you see what I mean? When I wasn't being cheeky earlier when I said this is going to get harder, but we're just going to rely on our ability to apply the same reading strategies as we move through. Don't let complicated vocabulary scare you off. As a starting point, just ignore the complicated words for now and focus on what you do know. And most of us understand government funding arts. And if you can find those words throughout, you've already answered the first question correctly. Now, before we go on to some other practice with this article, I wanted to point out that your first paragraph here does give you a lot of helpful background information. So let's go through that. Yes, we know that it's all about funding of the arts. I mean, that's labeled here twice yet again. But check out the other important details. We learn here that in the past, it looks like there's been a long history of the Canadian government putting money into the arts. But it looks like, as we continue to read, currently we've got these difficult fiscal choices, which basically boils down to money issues or finances. And it looks like the government is starting to withdraw its funding bit by bit. It's increasingly withdrawing its funding. So it used to fund the arts a lot, and nowadays not so much, is more or less the simple interpretation. Some of the people that we meet throughout this article, and we already saw a few names, didn't we, as we skimmed? Some of these people are going to probably want the government to fund the arts, but others, we're told, will think it's a waste of money and will not want government funding. So that's what passage 4 is always about on your reading test. You'll have some people supporting, some people opposing, and you need to figure out whose opinion is whose and why they feel that way. So here's your second paragraph. And what I'd like us to do very quickly is just identify the person. We skipped her name over earlier, but we're going to have a deeper look at who she is and what she's all about. This will be, again, good practice for keyword identification. So do you see her name right in the opening line? Again, names are so easy to spot because they always have capital letters. So Miriam Donahue is mentioned there. Okay, so we read after her name that she happens to work for the Canadian Taxpayers League. Again, these words are capitalized, so we know it's the name of something. In this case, it's like a company in a way. I would strongly recommend for your reading part 4, you take notes as well. Keep track of who you're meeting and what they believe. So on the right of the screen, we'll pretend this is our note paper. At the very top, I've used my own shorthand to represent the topic of this passage. So that says government funding for the arts, question mark. In my mind, that made sense to me. You are very welcome to use your own title, but keep your notes quick and short, right? Just get the points down. When you do encounter a person, please write their name down right away before you forget them. Notice here that I focus mainly on the last name. I put M for Miriam, that's the first initial, but I put Donahue because this is a formal news article. So the questions will probably focus on the last name. That's just a formality. So I wrote the full surname as you see it. And then I, in my shorthand, summarized where she works, Canadian Taxpayers League. Okay, before we even continue to read, here's where it gets extra fun. The most successful readers are ones who are relating and connecting personally to what they're reading as they're reading. So the fact that she works for the Canadian Taxpayers League, let me ask you this. Who are the taxpayers in Canadian society? This passage won't tell you, but I want you to know that from your own knowledge of how the world works. Who pays taxes in Canada if you already live here? Yeah, the citizens. We do. The general citizen, right? Everyone, you're saying. So the citizen pays taxes. Now, Donahue works for the Canadian Taxpayers League. Whose interest do you feel she has at heart? The government's or the citizens? Do you think? Based on what you know of us paying taxes here in Canada. If she works for the Canadian Taxpayers League, does she support the government? Does she support the citizens? Do you think? This article doesn't tell you, but you're going to come up with that assumption yourself based on your personal connection. If she works for the Canadian Taxpayers League, sounds to me like she basically is going to be supporting citizens. Anyway, let's move on. We need to figure out what her opinion is. We need to figure out, does Donahue support funding for the arts? The Zoom box right now is 2 divided. I have you half and half. So let's go back now to the actual passage and see what her true opinion really is. All of this, if you look at all those quotation marks, this is clearly she's been interviewed at some point, and whoever wrote this article is citing what she said in the interview that was given. I'm going to highlight section by section so we can break this down into manageable chunks because the vocab is quite high level, and so are the ideas too, for that matter. So the very first thing she says is, society doesn't accept government intervention in other economic sectors. The arts should be no different. Okay, let's break that down. When she talks about government intervention, what do you suppose she means? What do you suppose she means there? Government intervention. What's the whole topic of this passage again? Do you know? Yeah, Nisa, involvement. What's another really common word for involvement? What is the entire focus or topic of this whole passage? We're talking about funding, right? By the government. So when she says government intervention, what I want you to be able to do is make the connection. Well, government intervention must just mean government funding. It's just a really fancy way to refer back to the topic of this passage. And that's exactly what's happening. So in our own minds, let's just assume she means society doesn't accept funding from the government in other economic sectors. Okay, the economy deals sort of with money and the way the city's going to run, right? Sectors that I can think of just off the top of my own head, in this case, this whole article is talking about the arts. Other sectors that come to my mind based on my own life experience would be things like the restaurant industry, travel and tourism. Can you help me out? What other sectors come to your mind based on what you know about the way the world works and the city that you live in right now? I've just given you 2 examples. Arts is already mentioned in this article. That's a third. What other sectors can you think of? Oil and gas, sure. Manufacturing. Anybody else want to play in? Education, sure. Okay, you get the idea, right? So in your mind, when you see this, you're going, oh, this is starting to make sense. Society, these other sectors we've just mentioned, health, transport, manufacturing, education, music, etc., etc. She's saying they don't get government funding, so the arts should be no different. The arts shouldn't either. So there's our answer. She does not think that the arts should be receiving funding from the government. So we've captured that idea right there in the notes. Other areas don't get that government money or that government funding, and the arts shouldn't either. So we're halfway there. We know who, we know what the opinion is, but now we need to figure out why she feels this way. So the next section here talks about, notice I skipped over some of these crazy big words. Government intervention distorts the market. I'm going to leave that for now. If we need to know what that means, we'll come back. But for right now, let's focus on what we do understand. See if we can get through the answer with what we do understand. So artists should basically obtain or get money from the private sector. I understand that. I hope you do too. Artists should get money from the private sector. Okay, here's my next real world question for all of you. What do you know about the way it works here in Canada? When you get government funding in Canada, is that private or is that public? This article doesn't tell you that. You're going to use your own knowledge of the world to understand what's happening here. Government funding in Canada, because that's the focus of this passage, is indeed public. I'm glad everybody got that one right. She's saying the artist should get money privately. That is your second piece of evidence proving to you that she does not want the government involved whatsoever to fund the arts. She thinks it should all come from the private sector. So that's just more support for her opinion. We'd better get into why she feels this way. And the rest of this paragraph, she goes on at length about these other sectors. You know, we appreciate art like we do a good meal or a sports game. And here's where it starts to come into focus. She's basically saying the government doesn't tell us what to eat. The government should not select which artist is fittest for public consumption. Do you understand her point? It's kind of an interesting point. I don't know if I agree with her, but she makes a good point. Like the government doesn't say to us, go to this restaurant, go to that restaurant. So using that example, she's saying, so why then should the government decide to fund some artists and not others? Why is it up to them to decide who's going to get that money? And then here's the really important piece. Circles back to where we started our discussion. If that happens, she's saying, if the government does choose to fund some of these artists, taxpayers, and you all told me that's us, the citizens, taxpayers end up subsidizing the leisure pursuits of society's wealthiest people. The vocab there's really tough, but I get it. This is why she doesn't want the government to fund the arts. She feels that when that happens, the tax that we, the citizens, pay, that money we pay in tax is what's going to be used by the governments to fund the arts in the first place. And she's clearly associating the arts with a wealthier class of people. She doesn't think that all people in society will benefit from these arts, only the wealthy or the rich. So that makes sense, right? In her opinion, it might not be our opinion, but it's clear. And remember when I said to you, she works for the Taxpayers League. Whose interests do you think she has at heart? Does it make better sense now? She has the citizens' interests at heart. She's really protective of the way our own tax money is being spent. And she thinks that it would be wasting our own taxpayer dollar to have the government fund. So she's on our side. She doesn't want our money to go to waste. Does that all make sense now? So as you're reading this through, you're thinking about, as I say, that your knowledge of the world, the way it all works, and you're making those personal connections to put yourself in her shoes and to fully understand why she feels as she does. All right. Anyway, we already know, no, she doesn't want the government to fund the arts. That part wasn't so hard. The tricky part was to understand why. She thinks it's a waste of taxpayers' money. She's too protective of us, the citizens. She doesn't support the government's usage of public money in that way. Anyway, notice we haven't even answered any more questions. We had to read through that paragraph to fully understand who Donahue is, what she believes, and why she feels that way. And once you know that, you're in a better position to answer these questions properly. Okay, we won't answer any more of these questions for time's sake today. We already did question 1. Question 2 here says paragraph 1 provides, we'd answer that. Look at 3. Miriam Donahue's views would likely be supported by. So we have to understand what Donahue's views are first, and then we can look at the answer choices and determine who would probably agree with her. So this is partly what makes your reading part 4 more advanced, because you're making so many connections, not just with your own personal connection to the material, but also the connections within person to person that you're meeting. Anyway, let's move on and do one final question of practice here today. This is taken from the bottom set of instructions, and it looks like it's a little response from somebody to that main article all about funding of the arts and so on. So I would like to do the first question in this set. It's number 6, since we've already looked at the first 5 up top. Okay, here is your passage. And before we even look at the answer choices, I'd like to know who's writing this. Can you please let me know their job title? Look at the very opening of this paragraph. We do not see the person's name, but we see very clearly who they are. This is step 1. Let me know in the Zoom chat, who is this person? Yeah, it is a musician, but can you be a little bit more specific than that? I think it's going to help. You see how some of you in the Zoom chat are giving me that extra bit of detail. It's a rock musician or alternative rock musician, sure. But we need to know sort of what genre of music this person is playing. Yes, they're a musician, but that's just a little bit general. It's a rock musician. So this is step 1. Who is this person? On your notes, I want you to write that down. Keep track of it. So rock musician, you write that down. Now we have to keep reading and figure out, does this rock musician want funding for the arts from the government? Yes or no? Please read their paragraph and let me know in the Zoom chat box. Do they want the government to fund the arts? Yes or no? Okay. Everybody's got this right today. This is wonderful. The answer is yes, absolutely. The rock musician certainly does want the government to fund the arts. And we know that because the musicians themselves, this band, they keep going to the government asking for money so they can go on tour. So clearly, if the rock musician wants money to tour, they would like the government to fund them. So the answer there is yes. So notice the rock musician has an opposite opinion to Donahue. Donahue does not want funding, but the rock musician does. Okay, now as we continue to read this musician's paragraph, we get the final piece to the puzzle here. This rock musician, the band, keeps getting denied money by the government. So according to this rock musician, the government does fund some types of music like ballet, opera, and symphony. But the complaint here is that because this band plays rock music, they feel that they're being discriminated against, I suppose. They're not getting any funding like these other types of music are. So they're very unhappy, we can imagine, right, with that discrepancy. So we need to understand that background. So now when we go right into the question below, we have enough information, we hope, to make an informed decision. The musician continues and says, so Miriam Donahue strikes a chord with me, which just means she says something that I really agree with. When she says governments that fund the arts, look at your answer choices. They're pretty complex. I tell you what, I'm going to place Donahue's paragraph at the bottom here. We've already looked at this in tremendous detail. I've got those 4 answer choices up top, and I'd like to go through them one at a time with you now until we find the answer that is true for both Donahue and the rock musician based on their background. Okay, so if answer choice A is correct, this entire statement would read, so Miriam Donahue strikes a chord with me when she says governments that fund the arts do so without economic intervention. Is that true? Yes or no? Anybody want to take a guess before I explain it to you? It's tricky. The vocab is very, very tricky here. Remember what we said earlier about economic intervention. Think of economic intervention as basically being the funding, right? When you intervene, you have to do something to change the situation. You take action to do so. So when we think of funding of the arts, if the government does fund publicly the arts in Canada, that action is a kind of economic intervention because the government basically has to get involved by giving money to the arts programs in order to keep them afloat. So if statement A is going to be true, the entire statement would read, governments that fund the arts do so with economic intervention, right? But unfortunately, that's not what this answer choice says. It says do so without economic intervention. So answer choice A is complex with the vocab, but the idea itself is pretty simple to understand when you realize they're just talking about funding. So clearly we need to show intervention to keep these arts programs open. So answer choice A doesn't make sense. It's the opposite situation. So let's just cross that from our list and we're going to move on. Here's the second option. If it's true, the whole statement would read, Donahue strikes a chord with me when she says, governments that fund the arts pay for the pastimes of the elite. That is ringing a bell for me. Is it ringing a bell for you? It means, does it sound a little bit familiar to you based on the vocabulary? Remember Donahue's paragraph right below this. I remember distinctly, we took notes on this. So taxpayers subsidize the leisure pursuits of society's wealthiest people. In our notes, we summarize that in simple language. Donahue doesn't want funding because she thinks that we, the citizens, are going to pay for the rich people's fund. So this statement is true for Donahue, yes. It also has to be true for the musician. Is it true for the musician? Does the musician feel that only the elite or the wealthy types of musical hobbies are getting funding? Do you remember reading anything about that? I do too. Can you give me an example? I'll show you his or the musician's paragraph in a second. What types of music are getting funding according to the musician? Do you remember? I pointed them out to you. Yeah, like ballet and symphony. What can you tell me about ballet and symphony? Are those types of music associated with the wealthy and the elite or not? Let's make these connections here. Now you got it. Yeah, yeah. So see what I mean by personal connections? This is the right answer. Absolutely. As I say, I'll show you the musician's paragraph in just a moment for those of you wondering what we're going on about here. But this is definitely the right answer. It's true for both the musician and Donahue. These other two answers here, I would still read them through and make sure we've not missed anything. But they are not correct. C says undervalue the work of modern musicians. Okay, I can see why the musician would feel that way. They've asked for money from the government and the government has said no. Clearly, the rock musician feels undervalued, right? Donahue doesn't say anything about undervaluing modern musicians. So that can't be true for both of them. So it's not the right answer. That last option there, support administrators rather than artists. Off the top of my head, I don't recall Donahue mentioning that, but I do with certainty know that the rock musician only talked about different types of music. There's nothing there whatsoever in the musician's paragraph that mentioned administration. So because that answer isn't true for the musician, who cares if it's true for Donahue or not? We don't even have to go back and check. Whatever answer we select as the correct answer has to be true for both of them, right? So you're doing this in the quickest way you know how to do. And I just wanted to really show you the vocab because again, it is upper level, as you can see. On the left-hand side of the screen is that final sentence from Donahue's paragraph. So in the answer choice we've selected, the words pay for mean the same as subsidize. So these are paraphrased words. Pastimes is just another way to say the leisure pursuits. It's how we spend our free time. And when Donahue mentions society's wealthiest people, well, that's just another way to phrase the elite. So literally section by section of the answer choice here we've selected matches section by section Donahue's final sentence in the paragraph there. So recognizing these synonyms or paraphrases is what's helping us to match these up. So that's kind of the first half. And if you look directly above this at the musician's paragraph, same thing, let's match the vocab. So pay for means to fund. That one's a bit easier maybe. And the examples of those pastimes or hobbies of the wealthy class are here: ballet, opera, and symphony. And this is another example of you yourselves making that personal connection to the material. You maybe have never been to a ballet, an opera, or a symphony, but I'm wondering if perhaps you've seen a movie where characters are at a ballet or an opera, and you've noticed that people dress very fancy to go to these events. Men are often in tuxedos and women in ball gowns with diamond jewelry for all we see, right? Think of any movie maybe that you've seen. So all of those ideas going to the ballet, it's associated with that upper class in society. So that's the connection that we need to make in order to understand how these types of music are associated with the elite, as mentioned in the answer choice. And remember, I said, what kind of music does this band play that we're talking about? Well, the writer of this paragraph only plays rock music. So that's why they're so disgruntled. It's not associated in the same upper echelons of society. Okay, so again, vocab is tricky, yes, but your ability to personally connect and frankly understand how the world works based on either personal experience, movies you've seen, conversations you've had with friends, books you've read, all of that's going to help you put you yourselves in the positions of the writers of this article and have a better understanding. Okay, I'll leave that with you to sink in. I'm going to very quickly run through some of our free materials and introduce you to the online bookstore. So this is a really good opportunity for each of you to put any last minute questions into the Zoom chat before we log out for the day. I will mention quickly that if you are a newcomer to Canada, if you're looking to open a bank account, the CELPIP test has a partnership with the National Bank of Canada. And if you do open a bank account on our CELPIP website following those links, they will actually offer you a $300 cashback, which will cover the bulk of the test, CELPIP test. So it's a good offer if it applies to you. So please feel free to take advantage if you'd like. As you know, you could take CELPIP for immigration and citizenship to Canada. You can also now live and work in Australia with the CELPIP test. You can also apply in Canada for your postgraduate work permit applications when you take the CELPIP test. So I thought I'd mention that in case it applies to you. We do have 9 free webinars in total. So today was the reading webinar, clearly, but we do walk you through each and every part of the CELPIP test. So each of these webinars are 2 hours long and they are taught on Zoom. You'll find the schedule for the next round of webinars coming up right on the website. So celpip.ca/webinars will take you directly there. So once you've registered, we'll send you the link and you can come join us for free, which is great. We were happy to have you. We do have our YouTube channel as well. Name of the channel you can see clearly is called CELPIP Official. This is where we keep, by the way, one master copy recording of all of our free webinars. These are the same recordings that we're going to share a link in your email. So when you click on that link, it'll open the recording, or you can go yourselves to the CELPIP Official YouTube channel and find our playlist of recordings. Some of you might have a test coming up and you might not have time to take our next live webinar. So feel free to peruse the channel there, the recorded ones. That'll help you. They're all free to access, of course. There are other study tips there as well. Like there's a CELPIP study tip series, there's a CELPIP live series. So definitely take some time to scope out that channel. Everything there is free and there's quite a wealth of supportive instructional materials there. We do have a podcast series as well, and it's located on the CELPIP website under the blog section. So you'll find lots of past podcasts recorded and a new material coming soon. We have those 2 free practice tests that I mentioned a few times today, and that's precisely where the questions from today's reading webinar have come from. That one precisely is Reading Practice Test B, CELPIP Practice Test B. You'll find them both right on the website, celpip.ca. So I would encourage you to finish the remaining questions for the reading test that we started today. It'll help you put into practice the strategies that we've covered. And when you've completed all our free materials, of course, you can visit our online bookstore. The link here, or you'll find it by following through this link at the bottom. We sell additional practice tests there, and there are online study guides and textbooks and courses and you name it, quite a few materials to choose from. You can read a little bit about the content of each of these materials, and you see here the list of sales prices. These are regular price. There are half price sales quite frequently, so you can always keep an eye out for the next sale, and perhaps you'd want to make a purchase at that time, save a bit of money. And very likely the way to know about upcoming sales, the best way, I think, is probably just to subscribe to the Instagram channel, as we always advertise there a little bit in advance of when our next sale is coming. But all 4 of these social media channels do have helpful content. YouTube, we still go live every second Thursday, by the way, at 9:30 Pacific time with a new instructional episode there. And anything we present live will be recorded to the YouTube channel. Instagram, we go live fairly often too, but there's no set schedule per se, as we often partner with different guests living in different time zones even. So again, if you're subscribed to that channel, you'll always know when the next live episode is coming up. And at the very top of the screen, you'll see the customer service email in case you've got questions, especially about things like test registrations and transfers and such. They're a really great resource, and they're very fast to get back to you as well. Okay, so thank you so much for joining us today, everybody. Great work with all those questions. It's not always easy, but the more you practice and the more you open your mind to these new strategies and try them out yourself and practice at home, I think that's how you'll build your confidence and your success with this test. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day ahead, and just maybe I'll see you back for the next live session. Take care, everybody. See you next time. Bye-bye.